most of you know me. I'm Jenny, I'm one of the senior instructors actually here at FlySussex. And I've been flying, I learned in Sussex, not with FlySussex, with the school that's not teaching anymore, back in 2007, I think it was. So I think that means I've been flying for about 16 years. And I was, the first few years of my flying, I was living in London, working in an office there, coming down, flying at the weekends. And eventually, after a few years, I thought, I want a bit of a change, and I quit my job in London to go freelance. And took a month out before I started that. Oh, a couple more chairs.
More chairs for people.
And so I went off on my travels for a month. And that month became 4. And then I came back to London within a week, had myself a job and somewhere to live, and was all sorted. And then 2 weeks after that, it was November in London, and I was living on a canal boat with no heating. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? I've just had like the best summer of my life. So then I sort of packed it all in and went back to Europe and started working with a school down in Spain, and I worked at a couple of different schools before I came to Sussex. And I've been here 10 years now, a bit over 10 years, teaching pretty much full-time, running loads and loads of the trips and holidays abroad. In fact, FlySussex was actually running trips, a few trips before we started, but since I started, and Graham, my partner, for those who don't know him, since we started, the number of trips that the school's running has ballooned, and now there's other instructors coming and starting running their own trips. It's really good. So it means that there's lots of potential for adventures, and I think a lot of you have even been on some of them. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about really. What I wanted to talk about, I find that there's a lot of information out there for experienced pilots. There's a lot on going cross country, and there's a lot of talk about, I want to fly 100 kilometres. And there's often not so much for the newer pilots. So this talk is it's aimed at the newer pilots, but actually it's relevant to everyone, because the things that we see people doing wrong are the same things, regardless of whether they're brand new or very experienced. We see people making the same mistakes, picking the wrong conditions. The same things go on in their heads that make them end up going to land. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. And there's also a lot on practical skills. I know there's been a whole session this year on acro and SIV and that kind of thing, which is absolutely brilliant. But I like to talk about some of the mental side of things as well, the attitude to flying. I find a lot of new pilots, particularly in your first year or two, there's so much frustration, isn't there? You're like getting the right weather day, getting there, and you think you've chosen perfectly, and you get there and it's too windy or it's not windy enough, and you think, everyone else is doing so much better than me. And that's not the case. That's actually that's your perception of what's going on. And paragliding is very much a personal journey. Yeah, some people, most of you probably know Andrew Kaczynski. He learnt to fly a few years ago, and he went out in his first year, and I don't know how his partner stayed with him, although I think she quite likes her own space. Because he got something like 200 or 300 hours in his first year. And it's like, that's not normal. And when I started learning to fly, I think I got 4 hours in my first year. And I didn't do my first top landing, basically no one taught me to ground handle, which is part of the reason why, but I didn't do my first top landing until a year after I left school. And you look around and it's very easy to compare yourselves to other people, but what's going on in your life is totally different to what's going on in theirs. And you might not be able to just jack off work at a moment's notice and get to the hill. You might be living miles away and have to travel. And that frustration, and in the worst case scenario, if you let it build and get you, it can actually end up you going, sod it, I can't be doing this anymore, it's too hard. Whereas in reality, it doesn't matter. You can turn up and go and have a little flight and then go away, and if you don't get back for 3 months, it has an effect. It means when you come back you need to approach it differently if you want to be safe, but it doesn't matter. It's all about getting out there and enjoying it. And all these things go together. Everything's linked. How you view your progression is linked to how much you enjoy flying, and it's also linked to how safe you are. So the thread of my talk is all about being a better, happier, more confident pilot. And you don't expect too many sort of academic models from me. I might go off on tangents. What I'm going to do is take you through a few of my experiences and a few of the things I've learnt over my time flying, and maybe one or two of them will resonate with you, and you can go away and think about something that you can do better in your flying. And for me, if you go away thinking about how you're going to keep enjoying your flying, then that's what I really want to achieve out of this talk. So, why do we fly? Well, I learnt just because it was something different to do. And it was only afterwards that I learned all the amazing things about paragliding. This photo is from my favourite flight this year. And it's not the longest flight, but probably one of my favourite flights. This was a flight at the end of the day in San Andre, and it had been too windy all day. And we went up to fly in the evening, and we were there guiding a group. And it was a cross-country course. And we thought, how can I make this a little bit interesting? So I booked a table for dinner 2 valleys over. And I said, let's see if we can get there. And we got up the mountain. The wind dropped about 6 o'clock, and the sun was getting lower and lower. And we only all made it. It was fantastic. And on the way, we were flying with the sun just setting, and it was hidden behind the clouds when we took off. And we were going along the ridge and go, I'm not sure this is a good idea, going further along. So we were kind of committed to the difficult retrieve road. And then just as we got to the point of no return, the sun setting dropped below the cloud and shone on this mountain, and just got enough hot air coming up the mountain for us all to get the height to pop over and fly down the valley for dinner. It was great, wasn't it, Di? Yeah. So, for me, paragliding's all about those little experiences, that feeling of going and doing something a bit unexpected. But why do you guys fly?
It's magic.
It's magic, yeah.
It's the only real magic, really, for me.
Yeah, you get it. It shouldn't be allowed, really, should it?
Maybe I shouldn't be allowed.
Wow, we've talked about that before, haven't we? But it should be fun. And if ever you're doing it and you're like, oh, I'm not enjoying this, then it's probably time to go and land and go and do something different for the rest of the day, and then come back another day and refine the magic. Because there will be times you'll go and your head's not in it and you go, oh, I'm not sure about this today. And no one's making you do it. So mainly we fly because it's bloody awesome. It's great fun, it's great experiences, you get freedom, you get adventures. But sometimes it is really bloody frustrating. Because...
I look so young in that photo.
Yeah, so do I!
I'm always young!
Do you wonder, sometimes you're there and you've landed and you're like, why am I down here? And they're up there. And basically because you landed and they didn't. So, it sounds obvious, but what actually makes you land? And understanding that can help you stay up. So, this flight here, we'd had a tandem flight this was in Colombia. And I think we'd had 2 or 3 days there, which hadn't been that good. And we took off and we were having quite a nice flight, but we were on the tandem and together we just basically talked ourselves to the ground because it wasn't working. And then, but look at that sky. Like, it obviously was working. We landed that day because we talked ourselves out of it. We didn't have... we were like, oh, not working. Maybe I'll go over here and look. Maybe I'll go over here and look. And eventually we just meandered all the way down to the ground. Then we looked up and we were like, oh, we're such idiots. And there's lots of things that actually make you land in flying. But experience is obviously one, not being able to stay up. There's a couple of different sides to that. There's the sort of physical skills, being able to turn your glider nicely in a thermal, stay in the thermal, being able to find the thermal. Having that attitude where you're actually going to stay up. What puts most people on the ground, in my experience, is getting into lift and either not recognising it or sort of not going in and going, oh, that's lift, that is, I should probably do something about that. Now, what was it again? By which time they're in the sink and then they turn back and you turn back in the sink and you end up gradually getting lower and flying straight through the lift and then turning back in the sink and spending loads more time in the sink than in the lift. But when you're learning, you will do that. You can't expect to suddenly be able to do it. And a lot of the other side of things is how easily you get distracted, how easily you get tired, getting bored. One of the things we always see is people getting into thermals and going around a bit, and then they're thinking, oh, where am I going to go next? And eventually, before they've even bothered working that thermal, they've already gone looking for the next one. Like, what are you doing? It's there. You just left it. But you will do that. Other things that make people land, physical discomfort, like backache, having your kit not set up properly. And then, obviously, life. Now that's one that you can't actually do anything about. Sometimes life gets in the way. And if you've got to go and get kids from school, or you've got to go to work, you've just got to do that. And as much as you can try and organise things to be in the right place at the right time, sometimes it just doesn't work. And if you're going to enjoy the moments that you can get out, try not to worry too much about the moments you can't, and just accepting that they are just life, then that'll help you kind of say that. Another one that I haven't mentioned. Does anyone get nervous when they're in the air?
Yeah.
It's normal.
It's totally normal. I'll never forget the first time I found out that what I was feeling when I was feeling nervous in the air, that was totally, totally normal. I don't know, some of you probably know Owen, he's always out on the hills here, he's flying tandem. Matt Pepper on the right, I think he's back flying in Dover and Folkestone now, he was away for quite a long time. And, sorry, on the left, on the right, this is Owen J.O., who was the guy who taught me how to fly in the mountains. And these guys this was about 12 years ago when I was in Annecy and we were having a conversation around the table. And even back then, all these guys had thousands of hours flying. They'd flown in the mountains loads of times. And then we were sat around the table and they started talking about being nervous in the air. And I just looked at them and I was like, what? You guys get nervous? And it was like a proper watershed moment because you're like, yeah, everyone does. And if you're there up at 1,000 feet off the ground, attached by a bit of string to a bit of fabric, and you don't occasionally feel a little bit nervous, then you're not normal. So, one of the things, I think, did you do your presentation on fear of flying for the club, or was that in London?
I did it at Glynde for the Southern Club.
Yeah.
Barb's asked me to do it again in London for London Wing, which is Southern Club plus Thames Valley.
Yeah.
About a quarter of Southern Club members are in London. It was supposed to be a week or two ago, and he postponed it, and there will be another event at some point. So
Yeah.
we'll do it again.
So I'm not going to go into. There's so much you can read about fear of flying, and Robin's done a presentation on it, and is doing another one. And
There's the presentation slides and a short note are on Telegram.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go into loads of detail about it, but a little bit. So you do things that scare you. This is the best via ferrata ever. It's well, at the end of it I say that. The first half of it where you're slogging up the mountain is really boring. But you end up on this like wire hanging out over massive great drop, 2,000 metres above sea level. But yeah, you feel fear, you feel anxiety in a lot of the things you do in life, but it doesn't stop you doing them because there's not masses of risk involved. Whereas in paragliding, there is risk involved, and sometimes it's actually right to feel a bit of fear. So when you do start getting nervous in the air, there are things you can do about it, but the first thing you need to think about is it rational or is it not rational? Is what you're feeling important, sensible information?
It's a request to turn the lights down. I might be able to put the office lights on and then just...
Try it and see how it looks. If we feel like we're all sat in the dark.
So it should be alright.
Oh yeah, that's true. Let's see what the mood lighting has in store. Da-da.
What's that?
Yeah. Oh,
Is that alright for?
that's all right. And now I've got like the spotlight on me. So, rational fear. What's when you're flying? What's a rational fear? A rational fear, not irrational fear. What's rational? What's sensible to be afraid of when you're flying?
Changing weather.
Yeah.
Equipment failure.
Traffic.
Traffic.
Real.
Equipment failure. It is a sort of. It is a rational fear in that it does happen, but in terms of causes of accidents, it's massively, massively rare, particularly if you're taking care of your equipment, getting it serviced, doing all your inspections well. What is not a rational fear is when you're flying along on this perfectly good flying machine and you start looking at the carabiners and you're there going, are they really strong enough?
At the coach course at the weekend, they showed the video of the pilot whose carabiner was basically just clinging on to the end of the riser, and it was about to fall off at any moment.
Yeah.
One of them comes out every 2 or 3 years. Those images come around quite a bit, and that all comes down to pre-flight check fails. Really.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to look at something on rational fear and irrational fear, without going through all my presentation, and those who were present may remember it, there's a slide that features a crocodile. Have a look.
Rational, wouldn't it? Pretty scary, wouldn't it?
That depends whether there's a fence between you and the crocodile.
That's the thing. There's a windsock and there's a ridge. When the crocodile's at the bottom of the ridge, and you can fly over it, that's irrational fear. When the crocodile is right by the windsock, that is rational fear. When the crocodile is right by the windsock but you can't see him because he's covered by something, that's unforeseen danger.
So yeah, when you're flying and you start feeling that fear, the first thing to do is this sensible? And I love this. Is this a sensible fear? Is the weather changing? Or am I not quite sure what's happening with the weather? That's a sensible fear as well, because that's like Robin's crocodile under a blanket analogy. If there's things that you're not sure about, they could actually be quite serious. So yeah, if you feel that you're at risk or there's something going on that you don't understand that could well be a risk to you, then that's a rational fear, and it's probably time to go and land. If the reason you're doing it is because you're not sure about what's going on, then the thing to do is to go and land, assess it from the ground, have a chat to a few people, and if you then assess it and you talk to people and they say, oh no, that's that cloud's just being caused by the thermals kicking off over there and it's not going to get any bigger than that or whatever, then you can go, okay, I'll go up and take off again. Or it's actually the wind did look like it might be increasing, but it's forecast to drop and it has drop off, so let's go and fly again, no problem. So if you do go and land because of something like that, you can always go and fly again. If the fear's not rational though, if it's just that you're really high and a bit alone and feeling a bit vulnerable, then that's actually something that everyone gets and you can do something about it. I remember one time we were flying in Tenerife and there's a guy called Charles in the group, and we were flying along, we'd taken off from the top of the island and flying out, and it was like a 40-minute flight just straight down, and we were flying out and you couldn't see the landing field until you got to the coast, and then this little voice comes over the radio and just says, "Hello, this is Charles. Can anyone see me?" And he just started feeling really nervous and he needed to talk to someone. And we had a little chat to him and then pretty much went and flew next to him. Graham on one side, me on the other. Flew him down and it was all fine again. So, what do you do? What can you do to distract yourself when you're feeling nervous?
Oh, music.
Crossword puzzles.
When you're flying? I sing, yeah. And I sometimes, well, some of you know that when I'm wandering around, not concentrating, I start humming. There's actually a song going through my head and it's just the odd little note that comes out. People love it. But when I'm flying, I'm often singing, and then I know I'm actually starting to feel nervous because suddenly it's gone a bit quiet. And that's the time where I actually make myself sing, and I pick a song and sing it out as loud as I possibly can. Other things you can do is eat or drink something. It's a really good idea to have snacks easy to get at. Another time I often feel nervous when I'm flying is actually just before I start getting hungry. If I've been on a cross-country flight and I'm a couple of hours in and then I start feeling a bit nervous and nothing's changed, it's actually always because my blood sugar's starting to drop. By which point it's actually a bit too late to start eating. It's quite good to keep it up all the time. But having a sweetie, I tried to have some Haribo, easy to get to. Having a sweetie, give yourself a sugar kick, gives you a new energy to actually tackle on and assess what's going on around you. Having a sip of water, having a little suck on your drinking tube is really nice for just giving you something else to think about. Another one I've tried before, when I was flying tandems regularly over the winter a few years ago in Guatemala, we were flying loads of 30-minute flights and taking off, flying around for 30 minutes and going and landing. And then when I was flying after that, I'd be in the air and I'd be up for like 40, 45 minutes and I'd start getting a bit nervous. And then I realised it was because all the flights I'd been doing were 30 minutes. And once I got beyond that, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this anymore. And start talking myself into land. And so I started setting myself little goals of, it's all right, just try and stay up another 10 minutes, and then if you still want to go and land, then go for it. Or just another 5 minutes. And then once you start doing that, after that 5-10 minutes goes, you're like back in it again and ready for the rest of your flight. And I know I'm talking about longer flights, but it can happen if you're up soaring about and you've been soaring about for 10 minutes and then you start getting a little bit, oh, is the conditions changing? I'm not sure. Take some time to assess it, and if you are going, no, actually, it's exactly the same as it was. It's not too busy. It's all fine. I'm just feeling a bit nervous because this is my longest flight so far. Then just set yourself a target of staying up for a little bit longer. But the really important thing about it is afterwards, once you've achieved something or you've gone and landed because it was something, a sensible fear, is then to reflect on it afterwards and analyse what's happened. And analysing your flights afterwards is what will massively improve your flying. And it could be you sitting down and writing it in a logbook and then reading it through again, or it could be you going to the pub with the friends that you were there and talking it through and chatting about the experiences and going, like, Graham and I, when we're flying together, there'll often be one of us manages to climb out of somewhere and then the other's just grovelling about for ages, struggling. Both ways. And then afterwards we go and land and it's just like, you bastard, what were you doing up there for all that time? How did you do that? And it's a kind of light-hearted banter about the flight, but it's also a reflection on what we did and what we experienced and what we learned from it. So all through your flying career, whatever you're doing, that post-flight analysis, I'd say, is one of the most important things you can do. Another thing that will have you on the deck is if you're not comfortable in the air. If you've got faff with your kit, this is in Peru, flying. You can see Graham happy as anything in his acro harness there. Whereas compared to, I think that's Barney. Barney features a couple of times in this presentation actually. Taking off on one of his first flights when we were teaching in Wales. Doesn't look comfy. I think actually, most of you who are here actually did learn with the school. And Graham gets reserves in for repack. And what we often find when people come with their reserves and he's chatting to them and they start saying things about, should I get a new harness? Because I can't really get into this one. Or it's really not very comfortable. My stomach muscles really hurt. And for those of you who did learn with us, I can pretty much guarantee that when you left the school, your harness fitted and you could get in and out of it. So if a year down the line you're there and you can't, it's unlikely that there's something wrong with the harness. It's probably just that something slipped. And getting really familiar with your kit and how to set it up means that when you start, you'll be flying, and then at the end of a flight, you'll have been up for longer than you have before, and then you'll go and land, you'll be like, oh, my stomach muscles, they're really hurting. You've been holding yourself upright like that. And if you're finding that's happening, all that's happened is these straps on your harness have slipped, and it's now way back like that, and it's not comfortable anymore. If you want to stay up in the air for longer, you want to make sure all your kit's nice. So if you do have problems with anything, whether it's your sitting position in your harness, whether it's where your flight instruments sit, or you're flying with a radio and it's poking you in the ear, or whatever it is, or you're up for longer now and you do want a bit of water but you can't get at your drinking tube. These are all fixable things. You just need to remember, which is not actually, that's for me the hardest thing. I find if I find something wrong with my harness, I'll land going, right, the first thing I'm going to do is change that setting. And then someone comes over and we start chatting, and then the next time I think about it is when I'm up in the air the next day. Yeah, oh, bloody hell, I was going to do that. And it normally takes a few times to be able to actually get that sorted. So if you want to stay in the air for longer, if you've got a niggle, get it sorted. Talk to someone on the hill. Say, where do you put your vario? Because mine's like beeping really loud in my ear. Like, yeah, you go and put it right there. So all these things are fixable, but if you don't fix them, they're going to keep bugging you and they're going to keep putting you on the deck until you do. one of my favourite things, the thing that is something that everyone struggles with. We have even 1,000-hour pilots come out on trips with us, and they still get the same things wrong. And it's almost always what's going on in their head. It's what they're thinking when they're flying. And when you land after a flight, do have a think about what it was that put you on the ground, because paragliding is going to keep teaching you the same lesson again and again and again until you learn it. So if you keep getting distracted while you're in a thermal and wander off to go and find something better, you're going to keep bombing out. And you're going to keep doing it until you realise, I need to stay in the thermal. And it sounds totally obvious when we sit here in a room like this and talk about it. But like I say, even massively experienced pilots will be climbing, they'll be hunting for lift, and they'll find a bit, and then they'll go somewhere else, and we'll ask them afterwards, why did you leave it? And it'll be because I thought there was something better. Like, well, did you see signs of there being something better? No. So the mental stuff is what actually gets most people. Getting distracted, making bad decisions, not making a decision. Indecision is actually, this is your nemesis in flying. Everything you do when you're flying, when you're trying to stay up, when you're deciding whether to go and land, whatever it is, should be an active decision. Even if that decision is, I genuinely don't know which one of these to go to, so I'm going to pick one and just see what happens. If you don't make a decision, what you'll end up doing is going, right, I definitely should be either there or there, and I'm not quite sure which one, and you end up flying right between the middle to the ground. If you don't make a decision when you're flying, then you're almost certainly going to be on the deck, landed, before you know what's going on. If you do make a decision, and you go and you try something and it was the wrong thing, then you've got a learning point to figure out how to do better next time. And I'd say probably that is the biggest thing for when people start learning to thermal, when people start going cross country. The thing that makes them get higher, go further, is about their decision making, and then going, right, I've got these options, I'm going to take that one, go and do it. And if it doesn't work, you've just got more information for next time. But if you don't make a decision, then you don't know what went wrong. Getting tired when you're in the air, getting bored, and then sometimes just life getting in the way. But again, that's when you can't do that much about. If you're up there flying and what's going on in your head is what's happening at home, did I turn the oven off? That's not going to go away. You're not going to be able just to fly away from that thought. Sometimes life gets in the way and you've just got to accept it and deal with it. So when you're thinking about your progression, you are always learning. I've been flying for, what did I say, 17 years or something like that? 16 years, and I've got a couple of thousand hours. this is my playground. This is where I learned to fly in the mountains. This is Annecy, and I spend a month or two here every year, and every single time I do something new. I fly a new takeoff, a new route, something I haven't done before, because you will never stop learning. Or, well, you might, but you don't have to. Paragliding has always got something to teach you, from doing your first bit of soaring and extending your flights from 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes to flying 100, 200 kilometres. One of the things that we're trying to do at the moment is join the dots. We've flown a lot of the paragliding sites up the French Alps, from down near the coast up to Annecy and further north. And what we're trying to do is join the dots, whether it's all as one big trip or just so we can go, actually, yeah, we have now flown the whole length. And we've been trying to do this for years, and we're getting closer now. We can kind of see that it's possible, but we're still a few years from being able to say that we've flown from Gordon down in the south pretty much up to Switzerland.
But Kriegel does it in 12 days.
Kriegel's very good.
It's got human either.
Yeah, he is part bird, isn't he?
Extraterrestrial, maybe.
So, yeah, you don't know it all. I don't know it all. And one of the biggest causes of accidents is when people start thinking they know it. They start thinking they've got the hang of it. When I was in my first few hours of flying, and I took off at New Haven, taking off from the bottom because it was too muddy to walk up the top. And back then, on the bit where you walk up, there were metal posts all the way around. And I was like, yeah, I've got this ground handling thing. I'm getting the hang of all this. Brought the glider up, totally didn't clock that the wind had been from there and now it was from there. Took off, went downwind and flew straight into a post. And it was fine, don't worry, I'm okay. I had great bruise on my leg. It was a thing of beauty. But the reason why that happened to me was because I got overconfident. I was like, oh yeah, I'm really getting the hang of this. I know, my ground handling's getting really good, and I'm taking off, and I reckon I'm going to take off from halfway up New Haven and get onto the cliff and climb up, and it's going to be brilliant. And as soon as I started feeling cocky, this big metal post came and slapped me around the arse. And I learned a valuable lesson. So, but how do you know what you need to improve? Where do you start?
It's a trick question.
With your post-flight analysis, that's what I do.
Which part of your body have you broken?
Which part of your body haven't you broken? So yeah, ask questions, reflect on what you've done, watch other people. Go, why are they so much higher than I am? And mostly you can go and chat to people afterwards and just like, what did you see? How did you find that bit of lift? I couldn't find anything. And most people love to talk about how brilliant they've just been. So 9 out of 10 people who you go and ask that question to will be absolutely delighted to chat to you about what they saw that you didn't and how you can improve. Books, forums, magazines, videos, all sorts of things. Don't believe everything you read or everything you see on YouTube obviously. Have your few trusted sources that you can, if something doesn't quite make sense, that you can go, is this right? And it might be someone just making stuff up, or it might be someone who's, when you learn in the school, we teach you one way of doing things because we've only got you for 10 days. So we teach you one way of kiting the glider. Whereas actually sometimes if I want to kite up the hill, I'll use the A's and rear risers and do that to kite up the hill. So there are different options for doing things, and it might just be that it's something you haven't come across. But yeah, have people you can sound out about that kind of thing. But when you are setting goals for how to progress in your flying, one thing is to make them achievable. So if there's a skill you want to achieve, I'm going to talk a bit about thermaling in a second. The first thing you've got to do is, it's no good just to say, I want to be able to thermal. It's what's actually involved in being able to thermal well. How do you get there? What's stopping you? What's getting in the way? What can you think about doing that's actually going to be fun for you? That you're going to enjoy on your journey towards getting up to the clouds, so that when you are feeling a bit frustrated because you've bombed out again, you can kind of go back to something and go, yeah, but at least I sang that tune really well while I was doing it, or whatever it is. And then setting yourself up for success rather than failure. Not choosing something that's really difficult. If your goal is to fly 200 hours in the next year, but you're working 60 hours a week in London, it's probably not achievable. You need to break it down into smaller chunks. If you can do that and still get a good night's sleep whilst working 60 hours a week in London, you're very impressive. But your goals need to be your own. Rather than comparing yourself to other people, they need to be about what works for you. And your learning's not linear. It's not just suddenly, right, I'm going to do that and I'm going to just go out and I'm going to get better and better and better. Sometimes you'll go and you'll be learning really well and your progression will be like that. Other times you'll reach a bit of a plateau and you'll be like, oh, I'm just not making any progress. What am I doing wrong? And it's just that you can't always maintain a massive scale of progress. Otherwise, we'd all be Kriegel within 3 years. It's not going to happen.
Can't just plug me in, Jen? Not like the Matrix.
That would be good. So, I know a couple of people actually were asking me about thermaling and getting high, getting to cloud base. This is what a lot of people's first goal is like, how am I going to get up there? So, obviously, you need to find the thermal and get high in it. But that's all very well, but what's involved in that? How do you find a thermal? So that you need to break down into actually learning about thermals and what causes them, what triggers them, what sort of weather can make that happen. Going out to the sites. If it's your first time at a site, you're actually not that likely to take off and fly straight into the thermal and climb up. Sometimes it actually takes getting to know a site a little bit before, and you're like, actually, the thermals often come through in the same place. So, getting out and breaking it down into, all right, I'm going to get out. And when I do find a bit of lift, when I see someone out front, I'm going to push out and try and join them. And I remember Gandhi saying to me in my very early days, is that if you're scared of bombing out, if you're scared of going down and landing in the bottom landing field, you're never going to get up. You're going to be sat on the ridge, going backwards and forwards, and most of the time you might get thermal, but you can't really take it because you're close into the ridge, so you can't drift over the back because you're going to go into the rotor. So if you want to get high, being prepared to take the risks and pushing out is really important. What are you going to say, Robin?
Two things. Our next planned talk in January is Ked talking on thermaling.
Excellent.
And it's in its infancy at the moment, but we've got plans with lots more coaches on board to focus more coaching on red ribbon to pilot, including things like thermaling, with some coaches focusing on those topics.
That's brilliant, because it's actually a dark art, and this is another one of those things alongside decision making that even very experienced pilots still aren't masters at. And I mentioned Gandhi, and watching Gandhi fly, even some of the best of us, we can keep up with him a lot of the time, but then he'll just have a little genius move and you'll be like, how did you get up there? And it's like, all right, goals. I want to be higher than Gandhi, which is one that you can keep working towards for a very long time. But it sometimes happens, and it's very nice when it does. So, yeah, watching other people and seeing what they're doing and talking to them about it. Being realistic, how long is it going to take to get good enough at thermaling to get to cloud base? Who's managed to thermal of the newer pilots? Who's managed to thermal get up to cloud base?
Not in this country.
Yeah.
In Spain, not here.
It's not easy, is it?
Has anybody managed to gain 100 feet from the thermal? Yeah. There you go, you're winning.
Yeah.
Gain a foot, you're doing good.
If you can do that, you just need to keep doing it. And do it again and again. One of the things that you were talking about, Tom, was about that thing about when can you drift over the back? And a sort of flippant answer would be let someone else go lower and see how they get on. But in actual fact, drifting over the back, it depends where you are and what the consequences. To some sites, like if you're up at Furl and Furl's kind of very smooth slope without a big drop off on the back, and if you drift over the back and you've gone a bit too low to keep going, you just land out in the middle of nowhere. Whereas if you go too low over the back of high and over, you end up in really horrible gnarly rotor, and that's actually put quite a lot of pilots, a few pilots in the car park fairly heavily. So getting to know the site and thinking about what the consequences of going too low are. But I'd say rather than thinking about drifting over the back when you start, think about pushing out front. So get a bit of height on the ridge and look for other pilots out front, and you will see the really good pilots in the club, you will see pushing out front to try and find lift, because if they find something out front, then it gives you the space to actually work it, and then you can start drifting back. And when you get back to the ridge, then maybe you are high enough to actually look down and go, well, that's all tiny, I can flop over the back, and it becomes much less risky and much easier to judge. But the first time you go over the back, just be so high it's ridiculous. And then you'll probably still, my first XE here in England was from Devil's Dyke, and I got really high and I drifted over the back in a thermal and fell out the thermal and landed on the golf course. Yay! I went XE! Brilliant! But it was, for me at the time, it was a massive, massive achievement. So, oh yeah, and then it's like, what do you do when you get there? What do you do when you get to the cloud and then you're still going up? Are you ready for that? Can you spiral? Can you be in a thermal and then go, oh damn it, I misjudged that, I'm right in the middle of the clouds, and then just pop yourself into a spiral? And if you can't, well, when you thermal, making sure that you're not up under the middle of a cloud, but if you misjudge it, you might need to be able to have something in your toolkit to be able to get out of that situation. And that's another thing to think about. That's part of the thermaling toolkit, is you're going to be flying in turbulent air, so being able to deal with collapses, all those kind of things. So, yeah, of the more experienced pilots here, what is the one thing that kind of cracked thermaling for you? For me, it was turning the lift. I took off on a site in France, and I flew into a bit of lift, and I turned back, and I actually climbed a bit, and I landed a bit later, and a friend of mine said to me, oh, you did really well there. So many pilots took off and flew through the lift and then turned back for it and ended up not getting it. So actually, turning when you're still in the lift, for me, that was the thing that kind of cracked thermaling for me.
I must admit, mine was how much you can crank it in that thermal, how much you can actually get the bank in your wing, and you're still going up. You're not going down, your wing is banked over, but you are going up.
Yeah, so you're being inefficient in the lifting air.
Flat, you really crank it. It's amazing on how much you can crank it over and go up.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no point being really, really efficient in sinking air, because you're not going to get anywhere. Whereas when you do get a bit of lift, use loads of weight shift. Get the glider turning. You don't want to force it round, but yeah, don't be shy about having a really super lovely flat efficient turn. If you've just flown into a 2 metre a second thermal, you want to stay in it.
I think at Mario you like the sound of.
That's true actually.
That's what helped me. You know, when it goes beep 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 all the way around, nice and constantly. That's when I felt like I had my first proper taste of being properly. I had a little shitty sky beam and I just couldn't tell what it was coming out.
Yeah, I've got one of those that I haven't set up properly, and it's really it's.
They're not in the room, are they?
No.
Yeah. The sky beams you can actually set, and you can get them set so they make quite a nice noise. But if you just have them on standard factory settings, they're a bloody nightmare.
I used a hammer to tune it.
So, but the main thing is getting out there and doing it. And if you're not in a position where getting to cloud base is an option, because it's winter and there aren't going to be any thermals till February, there might be a few at the coast, but there's not going to be much good till February, and then before you know it, it's going to be spring and everything's super strong. There's other things you can work on. The BHBA is actually just bringing out, it's something they launched years and years ago, and it is actually a structure for new pilots to work through for their first sort of 10-15 hours with a load of tasks on. And when you read it, the way they've worded it is quite a bit dry and boring and a bit like a national association of academics. But the content on it, in terms of actual goals to work towards, is really quite useful. And I've got a few, so my ideas are actually quite similar to what the BHBA has put in, but a little bit more fun. Working on your launches so that they look more like this than this.
With Graham and Baker.
No, that's our friend Barney.
My friend Barney.
But it is Graham's old glider.
Got a memory.
Because if your launches aren't brilliant, then you're just setting yourself up for a negative experience right at the beginning of your flight. And if you don't go and practice your launches, they're not going to be brilliant. And if you get into the habit of rushing your takeoff and going, quick, I've got to get the glider up and turn through and quick, get off the hill before it goes wrong. I mean, that's how I was taught to fly, because paragliding was dangerous, and the quicker you got away from the hill, the better. We know better now, in that actually you can do all that in control. Who knew? Why did no one tell me that 15 years ago? And they can be brilliant, and you don't need to be a super experienced sky god to be brilliant at your takeoffs. In fact, yeah, again, I think most of you learnt with us, and you've all been that good. So if at any point when you're out there now and your takeoffs aren't that good, then it's only because you're a bit uncurrent, and you can go and do a bit of practice and get just as brilliant again. Your landings, this is a great one for winter, is you want to be landing right on the spot every time. When you're flying at Caban, actually this time of year it's great because you're going to have a dry bit and a load of wet bits. And the consequences of getting it wrong are enough to make you not want to, but they're not a massive high risk. So in the winter, you want your spot landings. Go and check out the landing field before you go up if you want, but you can normally see from above where the dry bit and where the wet bit is. So you want to be getting your spot landings beautiful all the time. You can be all through the winter just working on getting your turns super silky smooth. If you're flying and you feel like your glider's not really turning, I promise you there's nothing wrong with that glider. If you give that glider to me, I'll make it turn. If your glider's not really turning, it's two things. It's where you're looking and how much weight shift you're doing. And if you're trying to go over there and you're just looking over there, your glider's not going to want to go over there without you. So when you're in the winter, you can be working on getting your turns super silky smooth, going exactly where you want, going back to the thing about getting your landings right, being really strict with yourself about getting those approaches right. So you're actually, rather than wandering down the field, you're doing really beautiful carving turns back and forwards, getting your weight shift lovely, and everyone looks at you and goes, wow, they're amazing. All these things you can do in the winter. At some point in your flying career, getting to the point where you can do wingovers is absolutely fantastic for being able to handle your glider. But there's a massive caveat to this, because if you try and learn wingovers here in the South Downs, people will come and have a word with you, and that's because people have I think I know of 2 people who've crashed so severely that they're not flying anymore, doing wingovers on the South Downs. Because they're great fun, but when you get them wrong, and you will get them wrong, you can be in a collapsed, cravatted spiral dive before you know it. But once you've learnt them, they're a hugely useful tool. I can climb in really tight bits of lift because I'm basically being really efficient, almost wing-overing my glider back and forwards in these tiny chords and climbing up in places where I can't necessarily do a 360 because there's a mountain down that way or I'm going to fall out of it. So somewhere down the line, learning to wing over. That's not one really for winter in the South Downs, but it's something to have there. Another one is just generally being brilliant and not accepting bad habits. And yeah, that's our mate Dan, who one of his favourite things to do used to be to roll a cigarette while he was on a glide and have it. It was a bit of a challenge to him. That's not really the point, but if you're making mistakes, or if you're finding yourself getting lazy with your ground handling or anything like that, just having the goal of being brilliant and beating that out of you is a fantastic one for making you actually progress and become a better pilot. I've said it before, whatever your goals are, actually analysing them, sitting down, talking. I learnt so much of what I know, so much about the weather, so much about flying on the South Downs by going out on days that I thought were going to be great and getting there and realising they weren't. But spending that time I was there just chatting to pilots on the hill, both my little friendship group and then also more experienced pilots talking about the conditions, talking about why the sea breeze is coming from over there rather than over there today. So use those times. Any time someone's willing to listen to your boring parabolic story, take it, because it's a chance for you to reflect on what's going on. And above all, just get out there. There is no point sitting. Did that one ring true, Chloe? Yeah. Sometimes they just nod and smile and they don't really mean it.
Do you want to see my watch?
We might have used that.
But if you are sat at home looking at the forecast going, oh yeah, I think it might be flyable, and then you don't go, then you're definitely not going to be making any progress. Don't be afraid to get it wrong. Don't be afraid to have got the forecast wrong. Get out and probably find a few other people who've done exactly the same thing, and then you can learn from it. And be realistic, because sometimes you're brilliant, sometimes you're a rock star, and sometimes you're just a rock. So my kind of message is, get out there, have an adventure, but above all, keep smiling and keep learning. And if you want to talk about specific goals to set, get the BHBA pilot development thing when it comes out soon.
There is an advanced copy on the coaching telegram group.
Okay, so that'll be coming out soon.
Basically an A4 document, double-sided, and the idea is you fold it in half to make an A5 document that you can then staple into your pilot task book.
And it is quite dry the way it's written, but it's also actually got some pretty useful stuff in. And it's also got some bits where it says you should achieve 2 of the following. And I'm like, no, you should achieve all of them. Why is one better than the others? But mainly, get out there and enjoy it, because if you're not having fun, if you're not actually enjoying what you're doing, then why the hell are you doing it? So
It does also say on some of them, get 2 of these things signed off by a coach. You don't need to get any of them signed off by a coach. But if you self-certify that you've done something like a nil-win launch brilliantly, but you haven't, you're only fooling yourself, and perhaps
Yeah.
someone else could say, well, if you'd done it like this, it might have been a bit better.
So, yeah, I'm gonna leave that there, and yeah, just if you the coaches are, and Robin's doing quite a lot of work. It sounds like to actually get coaches to focus on specific areas, and sharing your experiences is what's actually going to have you reflecting and learning from them. So I think now we've got tea and coffee, and if you've got your beers that you brought, or if you've got any questions as well, then you can either ask now or we can just walk around the room and chat.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to